and welcome everyone. We're thrilled to have you with us for another great episode of BYOP on the Go. Tonight, we're discussing passion, growth, and the incredible journey of creating something that's positively impacts young athletes for life. I'm Ruth Nelson, founder of BYOP on the Go, and it's my honor to host this special episode in the No series. My guest co-host is David Delosier, a certified Go Kids youth sports skills trainer, coaching at Prestonwood Christian Academy, and has recently joined the coaching staff at Skyline Juniors Volleyball Club. David will have some exciting questions to guide tonight's discussion. It's our pleasure to welcome tonight's featured guest. He is the founder and director of Husky Volleyball Club. He launched Husky Volleyball in 1999 when there was virtually no junior clubs in Northern Connecticut. What started with a simple goal to give young athletes a place to play has grown into the largest junior volleyball club in New England with over 96 teams, over 120 coaches, and two facilities, the Den North and the Den South. His visionary leadership has helped transform the regional volleyball landscape and inspire generations of players and coaches. His passion for the sport and commitment to player development go far beyond wins and rankings. He believes in building a culture where athletes are developed as both competitors and individuals, where the process of improvement is just as important as the outcome. A lifelong learner and competitor himself, he is also a certified Go Kids youth sports skills trainer and has extended that opportunity to 6 additional Husky coaches. He brings decades of experience, contagious energy, and a deep belief in the transformative power of youth sports to build character, foster community, and instill confidence. We're excited to explore his journey, the remarkable growth of Husky Volleyball, and his forth-thinking investment in the future of junior volleyball in Connecticut. His recent commitment to certifying multiple coaches through the Go Kids Youth Sports Skills Trainer reflects a bold step in stepping the next generation of athletes and coaches starting from ground up. Let's welcome Pat Ryan to the show.
Well, thank you. Ruth, if you're around, I can have you eulogize me way out in the future there.
Okay. All right. All right. But before we dive into an engaging evening that promises to inspire and inform our viewers, let's set the stage with our short video. And Pat, you can jump in anytime if you want to say a few things about some of the pictures.
Yeah, we've tried to trend younger in the last few years because early on in our whole, history, it was all high school kids. Even in this part of the country, going back more than 10 years ago, there were very few middle school teams. And so it's expanded. And that was where we're like, hey, how can we work on getting these younger kids into the game, enjoying it, wanting to come back and play, and, getting really enthused about it. So, that's been our goal in the most recent years, while still taking care of our older ones is getting those little kids in there.
Well, I have to put this up though. David, this guy is still competing, traveling all over the world, and him and his teams, but he'll talk a little bit about that. But I wanted to make sure that our viewers saw that. So it's not, sometimes people think when you become a club director, you have to stop playing. And obviously it's been important for him to continue to play. All right, David, you're up with your questions first.
Well, Pat, welcome to the show. When you launched Husky Volleyball in 1999, did you ever imagine it would grow to include over 96 teams, 120 coaches, and 2 facilities? And what does that journey feel like now?
So absolutely not. It would have been, just a ridiculous, audacious goal that we never would have considered back then. We just, like, our first year, we were only going to do girls. And then a couple weeks before we were due to start up, the one other boys club near us, the guy said, "Yeah, I'm not going to do club volleyball anymore." So then we added boys on top of that too. And I coached boys high school here in Connecticut for 24 years. And so I was, a little earlier on in it, but like I wanted the boys in my own selfish interest to play out a season. So then we added boys, and we were just in a 2-court gym. The teams practiced 1 day a week. That's all that we could get was just that 1 day on Sundays. And, like, what does it feel like now is it's like a snowball's rolling downhill. Well, you're from the South, so maybe you don't get to what that feels like, but it's just bigger and bigger. And there's a momentum that seems hard to stop for us now.
That's
Fantastic.
awesome. Very cool. Well, as you mentioned, the growth of volleyball in Connecticut has been remarkable. What do you think sparked that explosion in interest, and how has Husky Volleyball played a role in leading it?
We just, my goal was always to never say no. Like every time, you know, we had kids that wanted to play, like I figured if we were going to turn somebody away, let's say, and even if they were just an average or below average player, that could be the kid whose neighbor across the street, who was 5 years younger, was going to turn out to be a 6 foot, highly athletic kid that would start playing volleyball because of her, next door neighbor, babysitter, or something like that. So we just always wanted to never say no, and only recently have we not been able to. The first year we were not able to take everybody was during COVID because we had capacity restrictions, and
Mhm.
then the last couple of years, we're some of our programs do get fully subscribed, and we're still trying to figure out a way to get them in because we want everybody to play. Like we're not snobs, we're not going out and trying to recruit players from other club. We want to generate everything, on our own. We want our homegrown talent, really.
Wow, that's
Awesome.
unbelievable. So you've credited much of Husky's growth to your coaching staff. What do you look for in a coach, and how have your alumni and mentors helped shape the club's identity?
A lot of our coaches are alumni now, so more than half, could
Ah,
be, if I ran the numbers, probably getting close to three-quarters of our coaches now were alumni. So like they know what our feel is, right? The vibe of the club.
uh-huh,
We get coaches who come in, and they're a lot of times a reflection of their high school coach, and sometimes that's amazing and great, and then sometimes it's something that we have to change in them, and some of the kids, and by kids, coaches, they're adults now, um, bring their own ego into it, so they're concerned, about the whole wins and losses thing. I try never to put the pressure to win on them, whether they feel it anyways, and they still say they do. I'm like, that's not what we're about on it. Like I don't want us to go into a tournament. I figure if we go undefeated in a division, that I placed us too low. That we want to put some struggle in there. And once we're winning, it's sort of like that Southern California beach circuit where we want to bump you up to the next division.
uh-huh,
Um, so once the players or the coaches learn to put their own egos aside about the winning and losing,
uh-huh,
that's when they can be the most help to the players. And one of the quotes that I try to drop on new coaches, especially when they're like, well, this kid's not getting it, or my team's not doing this, and I've tried to teach it. And I don't remember where I first heard it, but I'm sure it's a quote from a quote that gets passed down through the coaching ranks, is that if they haven't learned it, you haven't taught it, you know? And, like with some of the coaches, again, if their ego's still in, they take that kind of personally. And I'm just saying you have to find a new way. Somebody way back when, and I think it was John Kessel, was, when I did a bunch of his cap clinics, decades ago, was just, teaching these kids is finding just the right way to say it, because you could have 10 kids on a team and you have to explain the same thing 10 different ways to get all 10 of them to get it, and some
yeah,
kids can just do it by watching, reading, you can talk them through it. Everybody's a different learner on it.
yeah. So you mentioned
Um,
that having the den has helped both coaches and players grow. How has having your dedicated facilities changed the way you develop talent and build community?
really a lot of different ways, like just the convenience aspect is like the littlest thing of having a place to store volleyballs, training equipment, not have to worry about a gym being double booked, so as a club director, that made it a lot easier. But like where the big things are when we have, you know, 6 teams in the gym at once or more on a scrimmage day, and they can find somebody very competitive to scrimmage against.
Uh-huh,
Or when the little kids are watching the big kids, my 12s and 18s are practicing in the same gym a couple of courts away, and then the little kids can see the big kids playing, and
uh-huh.
I can walk up to them and say, "Hey, you guys need to be that good in like 4 or 5 years, so you better get on it."
So having a facility not only allows you the flexibility of having different age groups trained so that they can be mentored, um, when you grew up playing and you played USVBA, it
Yep.
was, you learned from what we said, the old folks. Now, we're in that, well, you're younger than I am, but I'm in that category. But look at all the learning that happens when they're around players that have come through your system, though. And your system really, it reinforces all the new things for the young kids.
And I would agree. And also for our older kids, sending them to, bigger and bigger tournaments over these years where they see other kids their age, especially not that many years ago, where they see other kids their age doing things that they couldn't even imagine themselves doing. And I
And
think the one thing I did leave out is that having our coaches and assistant coaches all in the same gym around the same time, and we have a coaches room where they can hang out in, and they're spirited debates and conversations going on, well after practices and well before they start, as they start sharing their philosophies, their tips and tricks, and that's helped everybody become, uh, um, more melded into a team of coaches, our staff into a team, as well as our players becoming, like feeling like they're part of something bigger, like the full program, and they're not just their own team, practicing by themselves and occasionally running into kids, from
yeah,
time to time that play for the same club, wear the same
okay.
uniforms.
All right, David.
So Pat, you emphasize focusing on the process, not just the results. What are some ways you help athletes adopt that mindset and leave the gym better each day?
I mean, that's the hard part, right? That's the secret sauce in all of this because, the parents and the players, they want to watch the scoreboard. They want to see the result of the play. They sometimes they look at their teammates, especially when they come in and even after they've been a while, as a rival and not just a person on the other side of the court. So, it's difficult to get them to put aside some of that stuff. Like for myself, when I'm doing camps and doing demos, I just try to remind them what success looks like, which is not winning the point at the end. It's going to be like when we're working on serving, right? And I'm with 10 and 11-year olds of saying, look, success isn't standing at the end line and serving it over the net. If you can serve it straight with no spin, that's a successful serve, and we'll eventually get it so that you can serve it 30
Mhm.
feet over the net. And teach them that the most important point of volleyball, we bring this up in camp, what's the most important point of volleyball? And they're like, the serve, game point. I'm like, no, it's the next one, right? You can't let your team lose the next point because you're still thinking about the last one and you feel bad that somebody made a mistake, so I mean that's a competitive and emotional maturity that takes a while to get through to all the kids, and a lot of them are still working on it, when they go off and play in college too.
Touch just briefly, David, I don't mean to interrupt, but touch briefly on the change in the athletes with the different generations, because you started with one generation, now you're in a different generation. How have you adapted to that?
I feel like it's a couple of generations. I think you skipped a few in there, and again, you know, I know you said you're older than me, but I'm pretty old, and I think like right now, kids come in and they go watch something on YouTube, TikTok, whatever. I had two freshman boys who just graduated this year. They were twins and they came in as ninth graders. I think they're like 6'2", 6'3", and like now maybe they're 6'5". So they're ninth graders. They first walk into the gym at the very first like tryout or preseason clinic that we did. And one of them is a setter and the other's the middle. And they're trying to run one balls, right? And I'm like, where did you guys learn to do this stuff? Like, did you watch a YouTube video? And they're like, they looked me right back and they're like, yeah, we're hitting it over the clothesline in the backyard or whatever, so kids having the ability to see these other athletes, whether it's their age or a little bit over, so easily, so when I started, like I can tell you for me for volleyball, I watched um a Cuba USA men's team on, I think it was probably Wide World of Sports, when I was in like seventh grade, and I'm like, wow, this sport looks cool, I want to play this. And so now they have so many opportunities to do it. And then
Yeah.
like we have kids who like they're getting better just because they're watching instructional videos from, people on the coaches on the internet and players on the internet
Uh-huh.
of, how to do this and that, and they're picking it up, pretty quickly right now, just from being able to see other people modeling what they want to do.
Whether it's good or not so good. All right, David, you better ask your
Well, yeah.
question.
For sure. So something really exciting that happened at the beginning, Ruth mentioned that you're still competing nationally and internationally as a player. How does your competitive drive influence the culture at Husky Volleyball?
I thought about, like this question a lot. I don't really think it does, like me being competitive. I try to put it on the back burner, like this is me trying to, you know, uh, feel the way I want everybody else to feel, right? Is that, I want to work on the process the same way, so if like as a club director here, if I make a mistake, I want to give myself the grace to let it go and figure out like, how can we fix it? How can we make it better next season? So every time we do a clinic, camp, the whole season, what can we do to make, the next clinic, next camp, next season better for the kids that are in it? And I don't want to get bogged down. Yeah. And this is probably, even with some of the coaches, I think it's a friction point for them because I'm like, they'll want to try to make it perfect. And then when you make those big changes, you can overshoot or you have unintended consequences. And I'm just like, let's make it better, right? And let's not, like let's go with what's been successful for us versus trying to make big changes and make it perfect and then have a bad season where, we have kids, parents, coaches unhappy because of, some decision that we sort of didn't fully consider the ramifications of it.
Okay, so are you glad that you were a player and then became a club director compared to someone who's never played volleyball before and they become a club? What advantage is there?
Well, I think the advantages, to the, volleyball players and experienced coaches are really obvious, there's less trial and error. I can go with like what's worked for me and what I've seen worked over all that time,
Uh-huh.
because I was, I was in my, let's say, late 30s, right? 38 when I started the club. And so, my competitive career uh, as an adult was winding down to turning into a senior person or, but I could skip a bunch of steps in the trial and error process,
Yeah.
and then once I started to coach, like it was an opportunity for me to um, try to see things from the coach's eyes about like how I did it. Because like a lot of East Coast guys, most of these guys, we're never coached by a coach. This is a lot of self-taught stuff, and so like I'm going to clinics with, John Kessel and the Art of Coaching Volleyball guys, and like I've tried them all, and strangely enough, I feel like I'm seeking some kind of validation as that gone has gone on, saying, look, like when we try to apply this stuff, were
Uh-huh.
we just like, making it up and winging it? Or is there any kind of, process where people have found, hey, this is the better way to do it, So, um, I mean, more than anything, we want to make those improvements as we go along, and we want to, try to give shortcuts to our kids, whenever we can. And I think the hard part for a lot of the kids and parents to recognize or realize is that there aren't a lot of shortcuts. Like you can't, I try to convince a lot of them want to do like one-on-one lessons, right? And I'm like,
Right.
you need to get in rallies because other teams are going to be out there and they're going to try to beat you. And, I mean, one thing I'd heard at a clinic one time is that, what's the premier skill of the game? And it's reading. If you can't figure out where the ball is going and get there, you can have all the greatest technique in the world, but you're not in a position to play it. You're not going to successfully make that play.
Yeah. So you've spoken with appreciation about your coaches, parents, and your wife. How do you maintain such strong relationships in a club that's grown so large over the years?
Um, so I have a reputation of being a distraction sometimes in practice as I'm going around, to coaches and talking to their players when they're on a water break.
Uh-huh.
Um, but I chat up with the parents all the time. I want to treat the kids in the program like I would want my own kids treated.
Uh-huh.
And so, like an example of that is, we have kids that have gotten injured, whether it's in high school season or during club season. And, we want to treat them fairly. I mean, the out of season injuries are a big example. Some kid, has a severe ankle, knee injury, has to have, shoulder physical therapy and misses our tryouts. we don't want to freeze them out. And I know it's a high anxiety period for them,
Mhm.
but like, and I don't want to promise them. I never want to promise them anything we can deliver. But like, even if they didn't attend tryouts, and the kid says, "Hey, I can come back." We have about one of these every other year if somebody gets injured during the summer or fall, and we try to, we'll work with them in the gym, even if they're not even in the club and playing and on a team that season, because like we want to give them that loyalty, that opportunity, and I think it means a lot when we do stuff like that. So, we had kids in those same boat that, we'll add them back onto the team in, February or March, and it may not be the team they would normally be on, but maybe one that has a need because somebody got injured, parent got
Yeah.
relocated, something like that, and like in the old days, I used to know all the parents. I knew all the players, by first name. And like sometimes it was tough, and it still is, right? That they want their kids to be on the ones team. Not everybody can make it. They're going to be disappointed, but like we want to treat all of our teams equally. Like we don't, and I hope we give the impression that like we treat our twos, threes, fours travel teams with the same uh, fairness and attention that we give to our ones teams. You
Yeah.
know,
Oh,
and
that's great.
and I think that's really helped us because like if I have a brag point, it's the teams I'm most proud of are not our ones teams because our ones teams do pretty well,
Uh-huh.
regionally now, but our twos, threes, and fours are the ones that give us that sort of very high region ranking that we have because our teams finished above, their average finishes are up there.
Uh-huh. All right. So with your kids having played in the club, how has that experience shaped your perspective on creating a player and parent friendly environment? You've talked about wanting you at one time you knew all the parents and all that, but how has that parent player relationship helped you with developing those relationships with the families?
Um, Well, my son went to a school that didn't have volleyball, and he did play a couple seasons, but like he would not keep up. But my daughter, she played a lot, and I stayed out of those team selections. I was always in the gym a lot, so it didn't seem like a lot of extra hours for me. But I did recognize how expensive it is for the parents and
Oh,
the
yeah.
time investment they have as non-volleyball club directors of being there, and so especially ones that have multiple kids in the program, is that, they feel like they're there, 4 or 5 days a week. And I tell them, well, that's because you're there 4 to 5 days a week.
Uh-huh.
And so, and especially if they have 30 or 45-minute drive or more to get there. So, um, it's challenging for us and for me just to keep remembering what the learning curve for new parents looks like because, and I remind them of this. I said, look, in a couple weeks, you'll be old pros and you'll be able to look up schedules and predict where you're playing on Sport Wrench and AES on day 3, depending on all your thing. You'll do all the branches and you'll be ready to go. So, I try to just be really quick, when I answer emails, and I always tell them, I said, if you give me, if it requires a short answer, I'll be lightning fast. If it requires me a really long answer and having, close to 100 teams, um, and I have to think about it. And now have to say, well, am I setting a precedent? And we're going to have to, is this something we can treat everybody? Those will take a little bit longer, but I do get a lot of compliments from parents because like I pop my computer open at 6:30 in the morning. I answer everything I got for the people up late at night. When I'm staying up later, I have my computer open because you know what, who needs to have 20 emails to answer at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning? And if I can bang out 5 or 10 of them before I go to bed, so.
Okay, David, you better get in your last two questions.
All right. You and 6 other coaches at Husky Volleyball are now certified Go Kids Youth Sports Skills Trainers. What inspired you to make that commitment, and how does it benefit your youngest athletes?
Well, I knew that we were like New England, the Northeast is behind the rest of the country. When we had kids who relocated here, they all started playing fourth, fifth grade. All of our kids here were playing in, ninth grade to start off with. And even 10 years ago, we had maybe low single digits of middle school teams. So, I figured, hey, this is our opportunity to expand. When we moved into our own facility, we need to have more stuff for them to do. So I made a mission going to the AVCA a couple of years ago to go to any sessions that had something for little kids, right? Beginners and stuff like that. And I saw Ruth there, right? And so I was rewatching those sessions when they would send them to us on, DVDs or CDs, and then on the internet. Tried rewatching them, and as soon as saw an opportunity, like say, we get Ruth to come out here from Texas up to Connecticut, I jumped on it, and I'm still trying to figure out though how Ruth can get like these, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old kids to do what she's telling them to do after just a small bit of instruction. That's the magic that we're still trying to figure out.
Okay, so my question is, have any of them used the Japanese floater?
We try it with the younger kids, yeah,
Yeah.
that have that challenge of the overhand swing, and
Uh,
so where they all want to serve, like regular overhand, but also that they have one that allows them to serve it over while they're working on it,
yeah.
makes them happy.
All right. Okay, that's good. And would you say, I've got just a couple things, David, sorry. Would you say, what did you learn yourself during that session? Because David, guess what? Pat's certified too.
I mean, what I was learning, making the adjustments for the kids,
Uh-huh.
like that one step at a time, is something difficult to come up with, you know, on your own. And I think also, like as a volleyball guy, right? Like we come in and I'm like, okay, I want this to be 100% pure volleyball stuff, right? Because, and again, I'll invoke John Kessel's name one more time, right? Is the game teaches the game, but I think the kids need like some of that general, fine and gross motor skill work,
Yeah.
whether it's, jumping rope or, juggling and playing catch and stuff like that mixed in to make them have fun, but also help make them, better uh, future athletes.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. All right, David.
Well, now that you're certified and gone through the process, what was your impression of the Go Kids Youth Sports certification, and how well did it align with Husky's core values?
Well, it aligned perfectly, right? Because a lot of this, you want to have the kids to have fun, right? And so if they're not having fun when they're doing it, they're not going to come back. And I think it allows them to take little steps, right? Instead of big leaps to getting better, better, better. And I think these kids, when they came to it, like every 10 or 15 minutes, they could say to themselves, I'm better now than I was 10 minutes ago. Like I wish we could get that, from our high school age kids, because a lot of them there's a ebb and flow to it, and then the older kids get frustrated, or when we try to teach them a new way, they initially get a little bit worse before they get better. And little kids, every time they do something successful, it's like the greatest thing in the world,
Yeah.
and so us trying to learn this and apply it is this makes me sympathize with the kids that are trying to do it, like even our high school age kids, because uh, like there's so many things that you can try, and figuring out the right situation to use it, takes a lot of uh effort's not the right term, persistence, like you need to be persistent in reinforcing the right things, and I think that's the disadvantage of having, been a player and a player for a long time, is that, and I try to let our coaches know this, of saying, look, you need to look this through not as somebody who's played, hundreds of thousands of hours of volleyball. You need to look it through some kid I had at a camp last week or whatever, and chatting with them on a water break, not distracting them from really doing it, but coming back from water break, saying, "Oh, how long have you been playing volleyball?" And we had a girl who's going into ninth grade this year who's like 6'1" or 6'2". She's like a week and a half. I'm like, okay, And one of the other girls was like, "Oh, you're already better than me," So, like these kids have to learn almost everything from scratch, right? We can't assume that they have done it. You have to tell them, here's where we're starting, here's where we're ending. The hard part will be figuring out how to get there between those two,
Yeah.
as fast as
So
they
have
can.
you
So,
used puffers for the older kids yet?
all the time, all the
Uh,
time.
do you like it in
Yeah,
the serving or attacking?
yeah. Serving especially, I think that's the easiest. Right? Look, and we've talked about serving, being that closed motor skill.
Yeah.
It's like they see uh, the cause and effect on that,
Uh,
really quickly on it. So
well, that's good. All right.
yeah.
So A huge thank you to Pat Ryan for sharing his incredible journey with us. Hearing firsthand about his experience as a club director, a competitive player, and a visionary leader was truly inspiring. His passion, commitment, and impact on young coaches and athletes truly lift up the conversation. We're grateful for the insight and energy you brought to the show. So, Pat, is there anything that you would like to add?
Well, I think I do this. I did this always when I was coaching, boys high school players. At the end of the season, I said, your job is to get 3 or 5 kids introduced to the game before next season, right? And with our players when they're graduating, I said, hey, I'm looking forward to you guys coming back and coach with us, and then passing that along to, kids, little kids in your town. Go volunteer at a clinic, because you don't know who that next superstar athlete's going to be.
Yeah, great. Okay, so David, remind us how teachers, parents, recreational directors, or youth coaches can become a certified Go Kids Youth Sports Skills Trainer.
If you're passionate about teaching kids age 10 and under, explore the Go Kids Youth Sports website to register as a host for your certification course. Early registration offers a special discount on your membership to RNN Sports Gym, including an 8-week training program, a one-on-one session with founder Ruth and Nelson, and full access to the world's only 24/7 virtual gym.
Wow. So a huge thank you to David for being our guest co-host tonight, and a big shout out to all of our certified Go Kids Youth Sports Skills Trainers from Nebraska, Montana, Connecticut, Maryland, DC, and Texas. Stay connected with us on RNN Sports Gym. Like us, tag us, share us, our stories to keep the energy going. Mark your calendars. We can't wait to see you on August 13th at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time for our next In the Know series featuring a surprise guest. You won't want to miss this. Thank you both for joining us.
All right. Thanks for having me on.